As we leave the Halo Infinite technical preview behind, we're finally given the time to cool down and consolidate our thoughts and impressions. I spent about 12 hours playing the Infinite technical preview last weekend and I had lots of fun. I think I have a lot of good things to say about Infinite's multiplayer, and I think the gameplay direction that 343 is going for is a step in the right direction. This is Ninja Synthray, and welcome to my thoughts and impressions of Halo Infinite's multiplayer. This video will be broken into several parts. You may use the timestamps if you want to skip to the parts that you want to hear. Before we get into the video, just as a disclaimer, everything that I say in this video are all subject to change when Infinite launches later this year. Since 90% of the flight consisted of playing against bots, it is not exactly the full multiplayer experience. While 343 were able to throw in PvP towards the end of the flight, unfortunately due to time zone differences, I wasn't able to dive in and play PvP. The very first thing when you launch the game is you're going to be hearing the main menu music. There is a 47-minute video that I uploaded on my channel where you can actually listen to the full main menu music. It's not all of it, but it gives you a better idea of the direction 343 went with the music. There are a lot of throwbacks to the previous Halo themes all the way back to CE if you listen carefully. I would recommend you sit through the entire video to really immerse yourself, because I think 343 has finally understood what makes Halo music so great. Just hearing it makes me very excited for the campaign. This next section I want to talk about is the implementation of Sprint. I know that Sprint is a debatable topic within the Halo community, but hear me out. The implementation here is much better than I initially thought. While I don't have a comparison video of Sprint versus walking in Infinite, what I can tell you from playing the technical preview is that the speed differences isn't that huge. I would probably say 8% faster than walking speed. Halo Infinite solves the underlying problem with Sprint since its introduction with Reach. Like 1, Sprint locking you into an animation, meaning that you cannot draw your weapon and shoot unless you exit that animation, therefore making you vulnerable and having less reaction time to fire back. 2, to compensate for Sprint, maps had to be redesigned for Sprint, which inherently comes with a problem of making the maps larger than it needs to be. 3. Sprint encourages players to run away from gunfights, making it rather frustrating to finish off a kill. In Halo 5, 343 decided to nerf Sprint by preventing your shields from recharging. All of these problems that I mentioned are less of an issue in Infinite because the speed differences is lower than the previous games. People are less inclined to run away from gunfights. Maps are back to being compact size, making both sprint and walking viable options. And you could fire your weapon without cancelling the animation. Along with Sprint came with the mechanic that can only be triggered while sprinting, which is the ability to slide. I think this is a great addition to the game, and it makes movement much more smoother when sprinting, and some people were able to come up with new tricks using this slide mechanic. Of course, with Sprint still in place, there has to be some balancing considerations. Throughout Halo's history, the radar, or what it used to be called the motion tracker, has seen minor updates over the years. CE to H3 would show vehicle and player movements, but Halo 3 introduced a balance update to not show players on the radar when crouching. Reach introduces the ability to detect if a player is above or below you. In Infinite, the radar works slightly different. The elevation marker no longer appears. Instead, you just have a regular dot, much like the classic games, to know their approximate location. If you start shooting, using equipment, or sprinting, you will appear in the radar. However, walking does not make you appear in the radar. This change seems very conflicting. On the other hand, it sort of punishes the player for using Sprint, while on the other hand, it encourages people to walk, just like the classic games. But what's stopping someone from rebinding their Sprint key so they never use it in the game as a way to hide from players at all times? Sure, if they fire their weapon, you'll see them on your radar temporarily. Like I said earlier, the speed differences between sprinting and walking is minimal, and both are viable options. Perhaps a balance change would be to show players on the map while walking, but if a player is crouching, they shouldn't be visible on the radar. Next up is AI and Spartan Chatter. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't really care for this. It just adds too much noise to the game as it is, and I much prefer to have the option to turn it off completely. Let's talk about weapons, the return of equipment, and power-ups. While I haven't played with the entire weapon sandbox in Infinite, a few are standouts for me. The assault rifle is a viable weapon here compared to previous games. Pair that up with your utility gun, the sidekick, you have a pretty decent combo to land the final headshot. Though the sidekick on its own does a pretty good job. The battle rifle is basically what you expect. As far as I can tell, the battle rifle in Infinite is almost identical to Halo 3's battle rifle in terms of damage and time to kill. Can I just mention how awesome it sounds like?
Halfway to victory. Killing spree.
The Bulldog is a new shotgun with a faster rate of fire, though it does take 3 shots at close range to kill, which isn't too bad. The Commando has a bit of a recoil to it, but still a very satisfying gun to use because of the sound. Heat Wave is an evolution to the scatter shot. There are 2 firing modes that you can use, either horizontal or vertical. Horizontal increases the spread so you can have it bounce through walls, or vertical if you want to have very accurate shots. The Pulse Carbine is a 3-burst weapon that does an excellent job at mid-range with its fast tracking ability. The Gravity Hammer is slow but does very good damage, oddly satisfying when using it with the grapple hook, which I'll get into later. The Sniper Rifle admittedly is a bit difficult for me to use in Infinite. I don't know if it's the result of the lower bullet magnetism in this game that makes it harder to use, but certainly with enough practice I can probably get used to it. The Skewer, which has 1 mag, I think this weapon is probably meant to be used against vehicles. Using it against Spartans, I kind of miss every shot, but it certainly does very good damage if you are pretty lucky to land a shot. The technical preview only had 3 equipments available, which is the Drop Shield, Threat Sensor, and Grapple Hook. The Drop Shield is an evolution to the Bubble Shield with a twist. Unlike the Bubble Shield, the Drop Shield is able to shoot projectiles to it. However, the shield can be damaged the more you shoot into it. The Threat Sensor can reveal enemies for a short period of time, which is sort of an evolution to the Promethean Vision from Halo 4. Of course, we can't forget about the Grapple Hook. I've spent so much time playing around with it that it's very satisfying to use. You can grab a weapon with it, throw objects, even grab onto a Spartan, or you can use it against a wall, which will send you flying all over the map. It's pretty awesome, and that's all I'm gonna say. Power-ups are making its return. The active camo or overshield can be picked up on the map on a fixed timer. This time you can carry it and use it at any time. And speaking of timers, there is an indicator on how long these weapons or equipment will spawn. No longer that you need to go into Forge mode and figure out how long their spawn timer is. However, this comes with a caveat which not many people are talking about. When you see the weapon rack that is colored red, this means that the weapon will not respawn until the ammo is completely depleted on the person that is using it. This is similar to how Halo 2's power weapons spawn. Someone could get a sniper rifle and hold on to it for a long period of time so that the other team won't be able to get one. Although I don't foresee this being a problem in Infinite given that most of the other weapons can counterattack that. Not to mention that this doesn't apply to every weapon. Weapons that spawn on the pads like the sniper or rocket launcher, they are on a fixed timer, which won't be as bad as Halo 2's implementation of weapon spawns. If the weapon rack is blue, then it means that the weapon is currently in rotation and will spawn in. There is an indicator on top of it letting you know how much time is left for it to spawn, likewise with equipments. Well, we didn't play much PvP. Most of the technical preview was about bots, which had 3 levels of difficulty that would change per day during the flight. First we had the Marine bots, second was ODST, and third was Spartan bots. Unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to play against Spartan bots, which I heard were very tough. Definitely, I think the bots need more work in Infinite. Sometimes I noticed they would follow the same pattern game after game. For example, in the map Livefire, almost every time the bots will always group together in the left side of the map, which makes it very predictable on every match on where they will be coming from. Sometimes they run into walls looking confused on where to go. Hopefully this flight test actually gave them more data to work with to improve the bots' AI when Infinite launches. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the technical preview was also part of their plan to do machine learning to improve the artificial intelligence of these bots. Next up, I want to talk about my thoughts on the outline system that replaces the traditional team colors that we had since CE. I've said before that I actually don't mind moving away from team colors. This is actually one of my main issues with Halo for a very long time, is that you spend so much customizing different armor pieces and choosing the right color to go with your desired look. But when you get into a game of Slayer or objective-based games, the game will either give you a red or blue color, which sort of defeats the purpose of customization. Halo Infinite changes this, so now you can customize your armor to your liking with different armor coatings, and instead of displaying team colors, an outline will be visible for both the friendly team and enemy team around their armor. I guess the only feedback I would say is improve the legibility because it can be difficult to see. There were times I kept shooting my own teammates, and speaking of teammates, I would like to see the player name or service tag just like the previous Halo games. This will make it much easier to identify your own team. As far as customization goes, I actually haven't done much customization in Infinite. I did buy a few armor coatings and weapon skins to test out the battle pass, and that's about it. There were some issues with it, so I didn't really bother. With Halo Infinite being a cross-platform game with Xbox and PC, does Infinite play well on mouse and keyboard? As someone who has played Halo with mouse and keyboard since 2009, and that being my primary input device for MCC, I think the game does feel great on mouse and keyboard. Though, because of the performance issues, it's really hard to judge the consistency of aiming. But in terms of features specific for PC, it's basically what you expect. Having the ability to triple bind keys is a good feature to have for those that want it. You can adjust your mouse sensitivity, which is a typical standard PC feature. The default keys are just about right, and I wouldn't change anything about it. Will there be debates of whether or not controller is better than mouse and keyboard? Probably, but from what I heard, most controller players seem to agree that aim assist is much lower in Infinite compared to previous games. And speaking of PC, I completely understand that this build is a few months old and a lot of the optimization isn't there yet. Not to mention that there are probably a lot of telemetry data being collected in the background which can hamper performance. What I observed during the technical preview is that the frame pacing can be pretty inconsistent, making it somewhat hard to aim when frames are basically skipping or duplicating. Locking the frame rate to 60 FPS doesn't seem to help either. I've tried everything that I can to get the frame rate to be stable, but still, the frame pacing is still bad. Also, the GPU usage is quite low regardless of what graphical settings you use. In a recent video by Digital Foundry where they made an analysis on the PC version of Infinite, you'll be surprised that even their hardware can't seem to go any higher than 100 FPS. All in all, I really hope that 343 can address this PC performance issue before launch. With the game being free to play, it is very critical that this game can play on a wide variety of PC hardware. Not to mention that finding new hardware, especially GPUs right now, is very difficult with the pandemic. So far, I am really impressed with the way Halo Infinite is turning out. Hopefully when the game launches later this year, there won't be any major problems with it. And of course, hopefully most of the content that people expect are available at launch this time around, like split screen, Forge, Theater, and many other more. I think that will do it for this video. What do you guys think about what you've seen so far with Halo Infinite? Do you think it's a step in the right direction? Did 343 finally redeem themselves? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.
Cause I don't want nobody to change me now. Cause I like to be myself. If you're not agree, you can walk away. You can walk away. You can walk away. Something in my mind makes me think,